Welcome to the NCFE podcast, a podcast dedicated to training, education, lifelong learning, and supporting progression into sustainable employment from leading education charity NCFE, featuring guests from across the sector.
Today we're going to be talking about social mobility, and as usual we've got a fantastic panel of guests to cover the topic with us. So I'd like each to introduce themselves now, starting with Shahida.
Hi Michael, my name is Shahida Aslam and I'm the Director of Operations for the Helena Kennedy Foundation. We're the FE sector's national charity that promotes equality of opportunity, enabling disadvantaged further education students to realise their potential by supporting them through higher education into fulfilling careers.
Thanks Shahida. We're also joined by Louise.
Hello, I'm Louise Lee. I'm a Helena Kennedy Foundation Awards recipient, and I'm here today to talk about my experience of having a mentor via Helena Kennedy Foundation.
Thanks Louise. We're also joined by Nadia.
Thanks, Michael. So my name is Nadia Mensah. I'm a manager at a professional services firm, and on the side, I'm the founder of Nadia Abna, an organisation I use to mentor and support students from underrepresented backgrounds.
Great. And we've got Becky.
Hi, my name is Becky Montague. I'm Research and Policy Manager at the Sutton Trust. The Sutton Trust is an organisation which champions social mobility in the UK through research, policy advocacy and evidence-based programmes with young people.
Thanks Becky. And last but certainly not least, we have NCFE's very own Dan.
Hi, yes, hello, and thank you for asking me to be part of today. My name is Dan Howard. I'm Operations Director at NCFE. This is a subject quite close to me, and I've spent the last 10 years working within the education and skills sector, starting off my career within welfare to work and supporting long-term unemployed adults in some of the most socially deprived areas of the UK. So social mobility is certainly high on my agenda and has been throughout my career.
Thanks Dan. So I'm sure you'll all agree what a wonderful panel of guests we've got today. I wanted to start by talking about what do we actually mean by social mobility. Becky, I'm going to come to you first on this one. What do you think we mean when we talk about social mobility?
Yeah, so a country which has high social mobility is one in which the job, income and education level of someone's parents and their family has very little impact on the job they themselves end up in, what they end up earning and on their final level of education. Conversely, a country that has low social mobility is one where there's a very close relationship there. So if your parents don't earn much, if they have a working class job or they don't have a very high level of education, chances are that you will be in quite a similar situation yourself, and vice versa for those who are from a higher kind of social economic background, they too will probably end up in a similar kind of situation themselves.
So Becky, how would you characterise the UK in its position on that topic?
So social mobility in Britain is low. For a child born in the UK today, their educational opportunities and life chances are really strongly linked to their parents' social economic background. And that goes all the way through the kind of life course. So the poorest children are 11 months behind when they first start at school. Disadvantaged students are twice as likely to leave formal education without GCSEs in English and maths. If we then go through to university access, just 8 top schools in the UK send as many pupils to Oxbridge as 3/4 of all other schools. And that's a similar kind of situation as you go through top universities. Those from better off backgrounds are much more likely to go to those institutions, although Oxbridge is kind of the most famous and starkest example of that. And then when you look at people in the most kind of influential roles in British society, they're 5 times more likely to have been to a private school than the population overall in the UK. And overall in this country, if you're born into a wealthy family, you're more than 2.5 times more likely to end up wealthy yourself. And then the pandemic has also had impacts on all of that, as you can imagine. The situation that kids have had during the pandemic has been very different, and the education they've been able to access has been very different. So while social mobility has stagnated in the UK for a long time, there's a real risk at the moment that actually it could be worsened by the situation in the pandemic.
That's really interesting, Becky. Thank you. Dan, you mentioned that social mobility is really important to you. It feels like a really good time to bring you in there and to talk about your experience.
Yeah, so I think social mobility means a lot to me, and I suppose I can speak for a number of reasons. Firstly, personal reasons. I am from a working class background, and just because of the postcode of where I was born should not determine where I end up in life. And I think I suppose I'm quite happy to break that stereotype, and was the first person in my family on both sides, generationally, to go to university. And again, when I look at my career, that shouldn't have happened because of where I was born, and I disagree fundamentally with that. And I'm now chair of governors for what was my primary school, and I go in and champion careers education and advice and guidance, and say to the people and the children in the community where I was born and where I grew up is, do not be deterred from reaching for your goals and dreams just because of where you live and where you're born. And I've seen that throughout my career when when I was on the front line as an employment advisor supporting unemployed individuals back into work. Again, if people wanted to fulfill their goals and aspirations, I supported them to do that regardless of where they were from. And I think we need to as a society tackle some of that stigma around just because of where you're from and where you live, it can hinder opportunity. And it's about having that more inclusive approach to social mobility. With my NCFE hat on, Michael, I think it's really important to me that NCFE is understood as an educational charity. We play a part in the education ecosystem, and with a core purpose to promote and advance learning. It's around making sure we're creating a fairer, more inclusive, and equal society for the beneficiaries of our products and services, such as qualifications. And I come to work every morning with that drive inside me to make sure that our products and services are having the right impact to our learners.
That's certainly what gets me out of bed in the mornings as well, Dan, I've got to say. And it does strike me as well that there's a lot of rhetoric around social mobility at the moment, but actually most of the action that we see being taken on the topic tends to fall to the charity and the voluntary sector to undertake that. Shahida, would you like to talk about what Helena Kennedy Foundation is doing about this?
So it was set up in 1998 in response to the Learning Works report by Baroness Kennedy to take forward the recommendations. At the time, there were over 15 million adults of working age with few or no formal qualifications, and many of whom faced significant barriers with or returning to their education. The then principal of Milton Keynes College, Dr. Anne Lim, then set up the charity, which started off by giving one bursary back in 1998. And now 23 years later, we're now giving between 70 to 80 bursaries per year to FE students who want to go to university. So, and to date, we've helped 2,000 people. And I've been with the charity just over eight years now. And I'm lucky that I get to speak to all of our winners a lot. And it's because we are so small. There's literally myself and a part-time worker, and we have a small team of volunteers as well. And it's interesting what you said, Dan, about encouraging people not to let go of their goals, because whenever I've spoken to any of our students, the majority will always say that somebody at some point said to them that, oh, you can't do this, or, how are you going to get there? And, the barriers are always there. And with what Becky said about the pandemic, I think it's it's just, everything's just been exacerbated for us. We get about 400 applications per year, and we can only give 80 of those bursaries to those 400 students. And these are people who are facing they're either lone parents, have got mental health issues, and we've seen obviously an increase in that as well. They're from socially deprived areas. They might be the first one to go to university. And time again, they've always been told that don't do this. And this is where the charity, we obviously give the bursary of £2,250, but we also provide the pastoral support, and that's become increasingly important when we've been speaking to them over the phones. And these are younger people that have said that, having somebody there to speak to and having somebody push them and motivate them as a mentor or us at the charity has really meant a lot. Of course, the money is really important, but somebody there saying, look, you can do this, and adding that value has been greatly appreciated.
Thanks, Shahida. And Louise, I could see you nodding along in agreement with much of what Shahida said there. And obviously, I think it's an appropriate time to bring you into the conversation, particularly regarding your experience of being a mentee and what that meant to you.
Well, of first of all, I was absolutely thrilled when I found out that I'd gotten the bursary. I have to say that, and a lot of that is down to my lecturers at Highbury College, where I did my access course. Who I'm so thankful that they recognised some talent in me and put me forward for the award. So I need to thank them. Yeah, having a mentor was something I didn't realize at first that was part of something that I could access. And then when Shahida sort of emailed and said, would this be something that you'd be interested in, having a mentor? I was like, yeah, brilliant, because you got so many questions about the profession that you want to go into. And for me, it's clinical psychology. That to have someone that you can actually ask all these questions of, about what it's really like to do the job, and also to do the job as someone from a working class background is really important. I love being at university, but quite often it's quite hard to talk to the lecturers and stuff about careers and things like that, because I don't know, you do sort of feel, I mean, even academia can be a place where if you're a working class person, you can feel on the outside. And me and my mentor, Dr. Sam Parker, we talk a lot about what it feels like to be a working class academic. Because it is that in itself is a whole other conversation that we could have. But
it resonates with me a lot, Louise, and I think being a working class academic, it drives you, and it's what makes you work harder because of the environment where you've been brought up, and because of what you see around you in your social life.
yeah,
It makes you more determined to be successful. So I often sit back and I'm quite reflective as an individual, and I look back and think, God, how have I ended up here? How am I doing what I'm doing? But it's my upbringing, it's my background that gets me there, because of the the ethic that my parents instilled in me. My education was the same as everybody else, that I went to school with, but I've somehow navigated a different career path to them. And I think it is that being a working class academic. I remember sitting in lectures at university thinking, I don't fit in here. But it's what makes you want to do it even more, and it's what drives you to want to be successful.
Yeah, definitely. And I do sort of feel sometimes I sort of stick out like a sore thumb, and that's not just because I dress really colourfully, but it's like just being aware of things like my accent. I've got a very like Portsmouth accent, and it's worse when I've had a couple of drinks. But and having that sort of professionalism, and I've come to think more and more about this. What is professionalism? And actually, I think that social class is really overlooked in professionalism, because especially in something like clinical psychology, where there is such a power imbalance between the psychologist and the patient, or the client. And something like only 19%, I think, of clinical psychologists are actually from working class backgrounds. And more often than not, this power dynamic is a clinical psychologist from a middle class or upper class background who's treating working class people. I think it's really important that professionally, to have working class people in these positions where there is already a power imbalance is really important, especially in healthcare, like I said, where this imbalance already exists. So I'm really looking forward to having my patients, my clients come to me and hear me speak like them, like how validating is that? That is so important, and I think that is just overlooked. So I'm not gonna tone myself down, and I'm not gonna change the way that I speak, because this is me, and someone's going to connect with me because of this. And I don't know, I'm getting emotional, but that's what I'm trying to say. It's important, isn't it, to have that realness about it.
It really is, Louise, and thank you for speaking with such passion and candour. And I recognise so much of this myself. I've had a real hang up about my accent since I've walked through the doors at work, and it's really inspirational.
That's it. Just own it. Just own it. My nan's from Newcastle. I've got loads of my family from Newcastle. I absolutely love the accent.
Thanks, Louise. Shahida, you wanted to come in there.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in there. I happen to know this because I arranged the mentor for Louise. But Louise's mentor is actually a previous HKF winner. So he was a winner from early 2000. So he would have faced similar barriers to himself at the time. And I think it's great that he's now able to relate to Louise and give back in that way. And so she's now seeing, the same language, I guess, and the way people speak, etc. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, very much so. And one thing I think we can all see is, that, Louise, you're starting to fulfill your potential here. You mentioned earlier that somebody kind of saw that potential within you and believed in you, and I think we'd all like to think that that potential is somewhere inside everybody out there, and it's about how do we get that out of them. So Nadia, you've got a lot of experience of mentoring on that side of things. So can I bring you into the conversation? Why did you see the need for that, and why do you think people should consider becoming a mentor?
Yeah, and I think it's probably a similar reason to why Louise's mentor became a mentor. I think it's that representation point and being able to reach out to people who you may have a similar kind of background to, or you may relate with in a certain way, and giving them that confidence to see that as you've made it, they can make it too. And I think that representation point is very, very key. I think similar to what everybody said today, I've also come from, it's a topic very close to my heart, given my background as well. I grew up in one of the most deprived boroughs in London, went to a state school and have somehow managed to come out, currently working in professional services, went to a Russell Group University. And if you look at the statistics from my background, that shouldn't have happened. So I guess one of the reasons why I mentor is because it's really given me that push that I've made it. And I've made it because I had some great people around me who encouraged me, who told me I could do it, who helped to connect me to opportunities, helped me to see that. And that's one of the main reasons why I'm here today. In my kind of sixth form time in particular, I was linked into an organisation called the Brokerage City Link, and they gave me a really good link in with the city. And without them, there's no way I would have gone through life the way I have at the moment. So in terms of kind of why I mentor, that's the biggest reason why, because I've seen how just having somebody to speak to, I think Shahida mentioned it earlier, having somebody that you can speak to, having somebody that you can ask questions to is just so important, because looking at my family background, I didn't have anybody who was where I wanted to go. So I didn't have anybody to speak to ask questions of, or to give me insight. But now I'm in that position, I can give that to other people. And it's something that I see my mentees in particular enjoying so much, because they can ask those questions. They can feel comfortable asking, is anybody at work going to sound like me? Is anybody at work going to kind of come from the same background as me? Am I going to kind of stick out? And I can give them some real kind of honest feedback and answers and support to help boost their confidence, so they know they can take that next step and also do whatever it is that they want to do in life.
Dan?
I think when you think about social mobility and social inclusion, what struck me is people not even seeing in themselves their own potential of opportunity. So I've worked with individuals in my time who are, third, fourth generation benefit claimants, for example. All they've ever known throughout their upbringing, their parents are benefit recipients, their grandparents were, and they automatically then went down that path because that's all they ever knew in life. And I remember once working with an individual who we'd helped him secure employment, and it was fantastic, and he'd gone home so proud of the fact that he'd broken that cycle from fourth generation. He'd secured employment, and no one was proud of him, because it was like, why would you go and do that? That's going to impact our housing benefit entitlement. It's going to impact on this and that, and it was seen as a negative by everyone around him as opposed to a positive. And more recently, when I see people who have been through the education system, but they're not necessarily that traditional academic, and I've spoken even with colleagues, I've mentored colleagues where I've said, you can achieve this. Well, I can't because I didn't do very well at school. Well, no, that's irrelevant. What do you want to do? And help people to navigate the education system to achieve their own potential. And I think the topic of social mobility and social inclusion, we should really focus efforts around people seeing what is within them that they may not see themselves, because it's a real travesty, and it devastates me when I speak to an individual who hasn't got any self-belief because their parents, their grandparents, and everyone around them doesn't believe they can do it.
Thanks, Dan. So I'm going to bring Nadia in now, and then Becky, please.
Yeah, I can just completely agree with what Dan has said. I think one thing I've seen from some of the mentees that I've worked with is there have been amazing kind of programs put in place in the city and in different places, but I speak to some of them and they've missed the deadline for an application, for example, and you ask why, and they just think, do you know what, I don't think I'm going to get it. I just don't think it's going to come through for me. And it's that kind of limitation that they've placed on themselves because of what they've heard, of what they've been kind of told, considering where they've come from, where they've grown up, their class backgrounds. And it is heartbreaking to see, because you can see the potential in them, but if they can't see the potential themselves, then how are they going to move forward? So I think that point on really helping people to see their potentials, and one of my mentees I have at the moment, I set her a task recently to kind of go back and write a list down of all the reasons why you deserve the jobs that you are applying for. And she just completely cringed. And I was like, go and do it, because I can see your potential, but I need you to see that potential yourself. And anything we can do to help people, especially from backgrounds where they may not get this at home, they may not get this in their schools, what we can do to help them see, because they have so much potential. They just need to realize that and have the confidence in that to then go and start taking those next steps forward in life.
Thanks, Nadia. And Becky?
Yeah, I just wanted to link this point back to something Louise said before that I thought was extremely important, which is that actually quite often people from a more diverse range of social economic backgrounds will be able to do roles better than how it's done at the moment because of that diversity and that viewpoint. And for instance, in the work we've done, we found that 29% of, say, MPs are privately educated, whereas only 7% of the population are. So they look very different from the group of people that they're representing. And that's going to have loads of impacts in terms of the problems that they don't see, the things that they perhaps don't notice because it isn't a problem affecting any of their family or friends, it's outside of their life experience. By bringing people from a more diverse range of backgrounds into those kind of important roles and positions, you can make sure you're getting all of those voices properly represented. I'd also say in terms of business, it can be really important because, again, if your workforce doesn't understand all of the kind of thoughts and kind of concerns and things that your clients and customers might find helpful, then you're not going to be able to do your job properly. So again, in all of those kind of positions, having a diverse range of people from all different kinds of social economic backgrounds that looks like the wider population is really important.
Thanks, Becky. Dan?
It would be wrong of us not to reference the pandemic and, how that is, I suppose, widening the gap in terms of social mobility and the challenges that we're facing as a country and a global economy. And I think what we're learning through the pandemic is not only the increased effects it's having on people's mental health, but the gap in terms of social divide is increasing. And I think, I agree with some of the government initiatives around, Build Back Better and the way that we're putting skills and education at the heart of our recovery. And it was interesting because I was reading a letter today that had gone to businesses from the Chancellor and the Business Secretary. And that they talk about, in the 3 pillars of investment in terms of being that foundation of our economic recovery. And one of them in particular was the priority objectives, making sure that they're trying to tackle geographic disparity, and looking at supporting struggling towns to make sure that we're regenerating regions, and employers are involved from a regional basis in terms of the localized skills plans, which are a part of the industrial strategy. And I just think, it's so important that businesses, going back to what Becky was saying, that businesses recognise the diversification of talent, and that your customer base will appreciate more the familiarity, and someone like what Louise said, she wants her clients to feel like they know her, she's one of them, and get that rapport. That goes across every sector and most businesses of every size. You need that rich diversification of workforce, because your customer base will be of a similar makeup and similar diversification, and they need to relate.
Very much so, Dan. Representation certainly matters. So I'm interested, and it's an open question to the panel really, that, what, almost in spite of government policy, what can educators do throughout the system? I think our listeners will be keen to do what they can to address some of the challenges here. What is within their kind of circle of control or circle of influence to be able to push the dial on this?
I can come in there, and again, not to repeat what I've said, but it's around, I've seen absolutely outstanding educators over the last 10 years where you're breaking down someone's self-perception. And so it's the quality of the careers education, the advice and guidance that learners receive, which, will vary up and down the country in terms of quality. It will vary depending on the institution that you're going to, but high quality careers advice and guidance in terms of people understanding what they can achieve and fulfilling their own potential. That comes from a whole host of different interventions, not just training, qualifications. It's like what Sharida said and Nadia, that pastoral, that support, that mentorship in terms of helping you navigate what is a complex labour market, even more so now since COVID, and more highly competitive. So I think it's around making sure the education system is helping individuals to navigate their choices, understanding what they're capable of, their style of learning, their ability, and their opportunity for progression in terms of employment, further study, etc.
Thanks, Dan. Nadia, please.
Yeah, I think what Dan said is completely true. And one thing that I've also seen is even within some educational institutions, it's understanding that they may not even be able to do it themselves per se, but they can also lean on other people to support them if that is the case. And again, I saw it in my own kind of secondary school and sixth form, getting organisations to come in and speak to us, organisations that could take us on trips to their offices to see what things were like. There are actually a lot of people out there who would be willing to support if you don't have the kind of capability within your own organisation to do so. So I think just even a bit of research to see what's out there. I know that within my current firm, people will reach out and see what can be done. And there are always people who are keen to volunteer and to support. So there are a lot of people out there who do want to help, and I think it's keen for people in the education space to know that and to see what they can tap into to help in this area.
Thanks, Nadia. I'm going to bring in Louise, then Shahida, please.
Yeah, I was just going to put a little bit of focus on adult education, because obviously that's my background. So I left school when I was 16 with 4 GCSEs, and then I never went on to further education because it just wasn't like expected of me at all. So when I went back into education 2 years ago, I had to get a maths GCSE in order to go on the access course. Although you can do maths and English alongside your access course, but it's so much work, and adults are expected, because when you go on an access course, you it's not funded for you, so you still have to work a job, you still have to be a parent, and you have to basically try and condense like 2 years worth of A levels into like 7 months to get to university. So we saw a high dropout of adults because adults are not financially supported in getting back into education. So although there's a lot of noise made about, retraining, reskilling, all this kind of stuff, that it's in no way made financially possible for older learners, adult learners, to do that. So I just, from that point of view, I just feel like there's a lot of talk, but I think government policy needs to reflect that if they really want people to learn new skills, if they really want us to retrain, if they really want us to, this whole idea of leveling up, then, there needs to be that financial support for adults to go into education. So I've only managed to make it possible, weirdly, because I have a disabled child, and that shouldn't be how it is. But because my son is so severely disabled, I was able to financially kind of afford like my housing and stuff through benefits to enable me to get to university. But I kind of weirdly feel that if I didn't have a disabled son, in a way, I wouldn't have been able to financially manage it. And that just seems really odd. But, you know, it's where we're at. So yeah, I'd like to see there be more support for adult education.
I certainly recognise that in my role, Louise, as well. It's something that NCFE talked to the government about a lot, actually. In the white paper, the focus is very much at those higher levels. We've got the level 3 offer, we've got the level 4 to 6 lifelong loan guarantee, but very little for those who, for example, might have left school with a few GCSEs, as was your experience. So, I certainly think there's a long way to go in the policy environment there as well. Shahida?
I was just going to add to that as well and say that obviously, with the voluntary sector and the smaller charities, the experts are doing the work. So reach out and work together with the likes of Nadia and NCFE that, we're already doing this work. So reach out to us, the bigger corporations. Because we're so small, we can do this work and take care of the smaller details. So, I know I've seen a lot of initiatives, for instance, around arranging laptops for children in deprived areas. But yeah, great, the laptops are working, but is the Wi-Fi? Have the students got, have they got the data in place? A lot of our winners, especially single mums, they're in refuge places, and they're having to spend the money on the data, the Wi-Fi. They can't access their lectures and the lessons. So to take care of the smaller details, and yeah, reach out, because we all want to improve each individual's lives. And like I remember we said it earlier, that talent is everywhere, but opportunities aren't, and to take care of that.
Thanks, Shahida. So we've talked a lot about education, but the ultimate outcome, and actually Gavin Williamson framed this in his speech to the Social Market Foundation last year. He said the purpose of education, and I am paraphrasing, was to impart the skills needed to go and get a job. So if we consider that in terms of people coming through the education and skills system, that's only part of it. What about employers? And are employers doing enough on social mobility, and what tangibly can they do? So I'm going to start with you, Becky.
Yeah, so there are some really good actions from certain employers who've really taken on this agenda and done a lot of work, but I think there's still a lot more that could be done more widely by employers. So at the Sutton Trust, we've published a guide for employers that gives you a kind of, from an absolute starting point, what can you do to increase social economic diversity in your workforce? One of the most important things is to have a strategy for it and treat diversity by social economic background as something that is as important to your organisation to work on as things like gender, ethnicity, disability, trying to improve diversity for those characteristics. Social economic background should be right up there as something that you're really caring about. There can be lots of things on that employers can do. One of the really important things is to look at routes into your workplace. So things like making sure you pay and openly advertise internships. There's a big problem of unadvertised internships in the UK that people from poor backgrounds just can't afford to take up, and that can be a block for them to get into industries. Looking at a more diverse range of ways for people to get into the workforce. So things like offering apprenticeships to make sure that you don't just need a university degree to go in. But again, don't just think you've offered an apprenticeship and that means you're done on social mobility. Especially the highest level apprenticeships can be actually quite not inclusive in terms of social economic background. So making sure you're really looking at access to those as well. Throughout your organisation, monitoring social economic background in your employees, just as you would for collecting data on things like gender, ethnicity, disability. There are really easy ways to do that, and in our guidance we explain to employers how can you ask about the social economic background of your workforce, and then what should you do with it what is normal across the whole UK population, what kind of actions can you take if you do have problems. Looking as well about not only getting people into your organisation, but making sure that they can actually progress and succeed. Just as there's a gender pay gap, an ethnicity pay gap, there's also a social economic pay gap of people who do get into the top professions from lower social economic backgrounds actually earning less even in the same kind of jobs as those from better off backgrounds. So really making sure that you're monitoring that and taking action where you see it. Looking at things like, how are we allocating work? Is it done in a fair way? Are we looking at the skills and competencies needed actually, or are we looking at things like whether someone has polish or is able to speak in a certain way that we've come to expect? And making sure you have things that formalise the informal. So for instance, it often is that people have kind of informal mentorship networks within organisations where people will choose people who they think are quite like them, that they quite get on with, and then they'll go to the pub with them after work, give them advice about the kind of things they should do to kind of further their career. If you have in place kind of formalised mentoring opportunities where people are matched, and you make sure that people from poorer backgrounds or other characteristics that are underrepresented have those same opportunities to meet more senior staff and get given guidance, that again can help to deal with that. And finally, as we've heard, outreach is really important, and going outside from the employer into the community and talking to young people about the kind of opportunities on offer is really important as well.
Wow, thanks, Becky. What a comprehensive answer there. Nadia, can I bring you in, please?
Yes, I just wanted to add on to what Becky said. I've seen some of those kind of policies work so well in various organisations. And one thing that I wanted to add on that is kind of even access, and Becky mentioned it there. And what I've seen work in the past is even access in terms of what grades you're asking for people to join, whether it's a graduate scheme or an apprenticeship, for example. Just opening that up more widely helps make sure that you're not limiting those who may not have kind of left with 3 A stars or 10 A's at GCSE, for example. Opening that bracket really does make sure you're going to be reaching out to a more diverse pool of students. Again, Becky mentioned more formal kind of programs in place. One thing that I've seen work quite well as well when it comes to work shadowing, you typically find that maybe a partner can get their friend's son or daughter in for work shadowing. But if you've grown up where everybody in your family is like a manual worker or everybody's on benefits, you're not going to get anybody who can offer you that position to come in and work shadow. So kind of cracking down on that, and again making those routes a bit more formal, then means that everybody has the opportunity to at least apply and try and get onto schemes like that. And then also mentoring on a wider scale. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of people are actually looking to support and to help. So seeing if your employees would be happy to mentor people, be it students, be it people who've been out of work. There are so many different people who need support, and a lot of people would be interested in kind of helping to mentor them in that way, and that links in very nicely to that outreach point. And I think, as Shahida mentioned earlier as well, there are many charities, many organisations who are working in this space. So seeing where your organisation can connect. Maybe you can connect with a smaller charity who has a really good network to people who need mentors, people who need support in this area. You can then offer some of your employees to go and help out with some of their programs and things like that. So I think there's a lot that employers can do in this space to support others.
Great. So some really tangible examples there. Lots of stuff that employers can actually do to shift the dial on this. Thank you. So I'm conscious we're going to have to wrap up very shortly, but I just wanted to give each of our guests a chance for kind of one last thought or reflection on the topic, really. So I know Dan's very good at thinking on his feet, so I'll come to Dan first.
Thank you. I think it goes on a lot of what's been said, and I think for me, it's around making sure that no one is defined by their postcode. And, I'm proud to be an example of that. But also, when you talk about inclusion, on Becky's point, inclusion within the workplace is not just the protected characteristics of the Equality Act. Think more broadly around social inclusion and what that can actually mean for somebody, and how that strategy within the workplace can truly transform someone's life and their career opportunities.
Thanks, Dan. I'm going to go to Shahida next, please.
Thanks, Michael. It's kind of related to what Dan said earlier about individuals not realising their talent. That if we've got the power to see that, you know, someone is struggling, or that they have got the potential, just to, you know, reach out to them and say, look, you know, find yourself a mentor, or if you can't find a formal mentor, you know, find someone else in another area that can offer you that guidance. It doesn't have to be a formal mentor. I've still got a mentor at this grand age, and I still call upon them. And, you know, at some point in everyone's lives, we probably have got a mentor, but we don't realize we've got one. And to do that, really.
Thanks, Shahida. Becky?
I think sometimes when you look at the data on social mobility, it can sound quite depressing. And I think what's really important is to look at the positive stories, some of the things that we've heard today about what is possible, and also to look at what we already know are a lot of the solutions that just need to be put in place and really push for those things to happen. So things like in the early years, making sure that there where gaps very first start to open, they were looking at high quality provision that is available to disadvantaged young people and they can access. So we stop the gaps opening even before they get to school. But then at each life stage, looking at what can we do to make sure that those from poorer backgrounds have all of the opportunities that those from better off backgrounds do. I think we know a lot of what we need to do, but it's just getting the push and action to actually put it in place.
Thanks, Becky. Nadia?
Thanks, Michael. So for me, it would be encouraging people to just start where they can. Everybody actually has a lot to offer to others. So if you come across anybody, if you come across any organisations where you feel actually, even if it's just an encouraging word that you can provide to somebody, you don't know how much that encouraging word of just kind of pursue your dreams or you can do it, you don't know how much that can actually influence the person that you're speaking to. So really looking at opportunities, I guess being a mentor, this is something that definitely comes to me, looking for opportunities to help others realise the potential within themselves, because they have it, they just need often a bit of encouragement and support to push themselves to get there.
Thanks, Nadia. And Louise, I wanted to give you the last word.
Oh, don't. I don't know. There's loads of things I could say. I mean, I totally echo what everyone else has said about how important, you know, having someone to talk to is. Mentor, you know, that visibility again is really important, because you don't know who you're going to inspire. You know, I just within my sort of circle, social circle and friends and things like that, you know, having the feedback there saying, oh, you know, I never knew that was something I could do as a mum or as an adult, was go to university and this, that and the other. So that's been really cool. And also just one more thing, just now that I'm at this level of education, now that I'm at university, it's made me realise how important critical thinking is. It's something I'd never come across before in education, because it's not really taught at a lower level. And, you know, and that kind of analysis of ideas and, you know, sorting opinion from fact. And I actually think it's something that is really important and maybe we should be teaching in schools, because I do think it leads to a more informed, socially aware and tolerant society. So that's like my great big speech, but I really think that, you know, we need to be bringing that kind of level of thinking to school age kids and just widening their ideas about society and things like that would be great for social mobility.
Thank you, Louise. And I just want to thank the rest of our guests as well, Shahida, Becky, Nadia and Dan. I hope our listeners have found that conversation as enlightening as I did. Thanks very much to all of you for speaking with such conviction and passion on a really important subject. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the NCFE podcast. You can find out more about NCFE, our guests and supporting information and links relating to this topic at ncfe.org.uk/podcast.